Welcome back to another episode of Clone or Die, and I know what you're thinking. God damn, you look like you work for a nondescript government agency. Very 90s, very GWAT, and thank you very much. I take that as a personal compliment. But regardless, today we are talking about Chinese Tokarevs, specifically the Type 54. This specific model right here was imported into the United States in either the 80s or 90s. This is a 9mm Tokarev instead of being chambered in the normal 7.62 25 Tokarev round. I got this because I wanted a Tokarev and I did not want to buy another caliber that costs a shitload of money to shoot. I already got 9mm. This was available at a local store, so I picked it up. And we're going to get into it. Now, as is standard with guns that's country of origin is a communist country, I like to test them in realistic tests that the firearm might have actually seen. So, for example here, we've got two targets that have been lowered to about height of, they're on their knees. They're kind of like on their knees, maybe their hands are bound, and you know, they like freedom and democracy. So we're gonna give this a realistic test to see how effective it is in this scenario. Yeah, I'd say that would do the job. So for these pistols, originally they came with like these terrible, awful, like fat grips for the American commercial market. That's not how the military ones would have come, or the export ones for other countries. I purchased a set of military grips, ran those for a while. Then I got these nice wood grips custom made, and I think these just looked really cool. So I'm running these on it now. And frankly, they're more comfortable than the Chinese Black Star grips were. These are a lot better. You'll notice a hole in the side of my gun. That's because my gun is specifically a NORINCO 213. And with many Tokarevs, when they were imported, they were not against US law because they did not have a safety on them. So a lot of exporters added safeties all over the place. They added them here, they added them here. It's just whatever, they stuck them on. They're not actually required for the gun to function though, and originally they would not have had it, so I just simply removed it, and it kind of leaves me with that hole right there. I could get it covered up or welded up or something in the future, refinish. Not that big of a deal for right now. Now, less so about the Russian. I'm going to cover more of the Chinese pistols here because I think the Chinese are more proliferated around the world. They were a popular bring back during the Vietnam War. A lot of guys would grab Chinese Tokarevs off maybe an officer, as well as they've been everywhere. They've been in the Middle East. They've been in Africa. They have been in all Asia, very popular in Hong Kong with criminal syndicates because NORINCO Tokarevs were so easy to come by. Now, the Tokarev itself is a pistol that is pretty much a simplified combination of a 1911 and a FN 1903. Took those two guns, simplify them as much as you possibly can, and make the sights slightly better. The Tokarev would have been based on the original 1911, not the 1911A1. So the original 1911 sights are pretty bad, so I'll say that these are definitely an improvement over those.
Hello, sir. I'm not a part of a shadowy government organization. Excuse me, could I get you gentlemen to sign up for my NGO?
Now, these pistols come about initially in the 1950s. There is a Type 51, which predates this, and then there's the much more mass-produced Type 54, which this would be. I should also note that there are some original Chinese military Type 54s that have imported now, and they're unmolested because they imported them with like a Glock-style trigger safety, and you can just take that out and put an original trigger back in and get it completely, you know, OG original. So, with the fall of the nationalists in China following World War II and the defeat of Chiang Kai-shek, the communists take over control, and the Soviets go to help them set up arms production with a lot of their older designs. They're a little protective of the AK at first and the Makarov, but they don't mind sharing other designs. So things like the SKS and the Tokarev, the Soviets would come and help the Chinese set up production for them. Of course, the Chinese ended up making a lot more than the Soviets did, and the Chinese ended up selling them pretty much everywhere in the world. You can probably find a NORINCO product or a NORINCO gun to this day. They still make them, they're still exporting them. Now, notable of this design is it is kind of a simplified 1911. So it's a single action pistol, but it does not have a safety. So, I mean, technically it does have a half cock notch right there, which is considered the safety. I think that's pretty bad. I wouldn't really rely on that. Doctrine of the day when this was adopted in the 1930s originally, other than the Chinese ones later in the 50s, would be to carry a loaded magazine. This particular one, a 9mm, carries 8 rounds, and then to leave your chamber empty and your hammer up. This doctrine would be the same for the American 1911, for the German Luger. It's a product of its time. I probably would not carry this in my day-to-day life with a round chambered and the hammer back. I wouldn't really feel comfortable with that. I know this gun is not drop safe. It has a relatively light trigger pull to go off. So if I was carrying it in the day-to-day, I would probably carry it with the hammer back and just with a loaded 8-round magazine. And I would carry it Israeli style, where I would come out and just pull the slide back. The reason I say the hammer back is one thing of note on these pistols is when the hammer's up, they can be pretty stiff to charge. They're notably more difficult than with the hammer back. So I would just carry it with the hammer back. That's not a safety concern, and it does make the pistol significantly easier to rack. Tokarevs generally are interchangeable on parts and interchangeable on magazines, even across countries. It's a little bit different though for the 9mm variations. There are 2 different 9mm versions that Norinco had made. They made one with a block in the magazine, so it used a standard Tokarev frame, and it had a block in the magazine so it could feed those 9mm rounds reliably. And then there is this version where they did a block inside the magazine well, and the magazines are just physically smaller than a normal Tokarev mag would be. These can be pretty expensive on the secondary market. Obviously, these pistols have not been imported for over 20 years. These magazines can command quite a bit of money on the secondary market. And I bought a couple of them and I definitely felt the pain, but I needed more. So I found actually you can use Zastava magazines. Zastava, I think it's the M88A mags, which is basically the same thing as this, a 9mm Tokarev that's a little bit more compact. These are 8 rounds. These work perfectly fine in this gun. They're a little identifiable. They have that little finger kind of notch at the end there. One thing I did note is these don't drop free though. Like the normal Tokarev mags drop free no problem. These, I definitely, when I was doing the shooting segment, I had to pull them out. Drop free right there, of course, naturally. It's just gonna fight me. But that was kind of my experience when I was shooting them. They weren't dropping free, so it's something to be cognizant of. But these are like 20 bucks versus, you know, paying 100 for the original Norinco ones. That's a much better deal. Although these do bother me a little bit because they hold 8 rounds, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 holes on them. But the bottom hole is not for rounds. And you just see the spring. So why is the bottom hole even there? I don't know, that's kind of an autistic thing, but it bothers me. Now, a lot of people kind of view the Tokarev as like a shittier 1911. Which isn't exactly true. Like I said, it's also based on the FN 1903, but I think that's a pretty good approximation of a Tokarev. Their ejection port's a little bit small. Depending on the country, they might have some measure of reliability issues, or depending on the amount of rounds, all guns after a high round count will start to have reliability issues. That's just a given. For me, it's just kind of has an iconography as like a bad guy gun. The Tokarev, or specifically the Norinco Tokarev. Like it's very much so associated with, first off, the Vietnam War, as I mentioned earlier, carried by officers, NCOs and such, very popular bringback gun, as well as in the Middle East, Tokarevs, Chinese Tokarevs, very, very common pistols. And generally in the Middle East, when you're dealing with handguns, that's a bad guy. Everybody has AKs, that's not too abnormal. Same with Africa. And it's just like one of those guns that I think is very iconic and very cool, and just a pleasure to own and be able to shoot these guns. I love collecting Chinese guns. I'm still going to continue to do it. I love that they make them there. We can have them, buy them, no problem. They can't own firearms at all. I think it's kind of ironic. But for now, that was a little treat for you on the Chinese Tokarev. This video was in fact sponsored by a friend of mine who said he would buy me a case of ammo if I used that song in the intro. So there you go. That one's for you. I'll see you guys in the next video.